of you for joining us today again for the October 2020 Presidential Lecture Series. We are so delighted that Tara Westover, best-selling author of the book Educated, which you can see here, I've marked up and put yellow Post-its everywhere, is able to join us today. Tara, thank you for being here with us. I also want to acknowledge everybody who is online. We have about 1,300 people who accepted the invitation and registered for this event. Before we begin the event, I'd like to go over some housekeeping issues. The first one is there will be a Q&A at the end of this event, so I encourage all of you who are online to please submit questions in the chat function. The event is also being recorded and can be viewed later. For those of you who may have to leave early, or if you want to recommend this to your friends, please do so. I also want to acknowledge our trustees and other VIPs who are tuning in today. Thank you for joining us, especially at a time when we can't be together in person. Finally, I want to introduce a special guest, actually someone I'm very grateful to for helping us get Tara Westover here to our campus today, Professor Greg Jackson. Dr. Greg Jackson is Assistant Professor of Integrated Studies and Assistant Director of National Security Studies at Utah Valley University. He holds a PhD in History from the University of Utah, as well as an MA in French Studies. Bonjour, Greg. Bonjour. And a BA in History from Brigham Young University. My favorite part about Dr. Jackson is he's the creator, host, head writer, and head researcher for the U.S. History podcast, History That Doesn't Suck. And if you haven't listened to this podcast, please listen to it. It's incredible. He's also a good friend of Tara Westover. So over to you, Greg.
Well, thank you very much, President. It's very kind of you. And yes, Tara and I, we go back a ways. It's my pleasure to introduce her today to the UVU community. Tara Westover was born in Idaho to a father who opposed public education. She never attended school. An older brother taught her to read, and after that, her education was erratic and haphazard, with most of her days spent working in her father's junkyard or stewing herbs for her mother. She was 17 the first time she set foot in a classroom. After that first encounter with education, she pursued learning for a decade, graduating magna cum laude from Brigham Young University in 2008, and subsequently receiving a Gates Cambridge Scholarship. She earned an MPhil from Trinity College, Cambridge University in 2009, and a PhD in history from the same institution in 2014. Currently, she is a Harvard Kennedy School Senior Research Fellow working on projects related to media and political polarization. In 2018, she published her memoir, Educated, which explores her struggle to reconcile her desire for education and autonomy with her desire to be loyal to her family. Educated was an instant commercial and critical success, debuting at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list and remaining on the list for more than 2 years. It was also a finalist for a number of national awards, including the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, the PEN Gene Stein Book Award, and the National Book Critics Circle Award. The New York Times named Educated one of the 10 best books of 2018, and the American Booksellers Association voted it the nonfiction book of the year. Today, Educated has sold more than 4 million copies and has been translated into 41 languages. President Barack Obama included Educated on his annual reading list, calling it remarkable, and Bill Gates listed it as one of his favorite books of the year, saying, "It's even better than you've heard." For her staggering impact, Time magazine named Westover one of the 100 most influential people of 2018.
Thank you so much, Greg, for introducing Tara. Tara, do you want to say a little bit about how you knew Greg way back when?
Well, we went to school together. We were history students together at Brigham Young University, and we were, I don't know, did we take the same classes, Greg? We must have been in a couple classes together. I can't even remember.
You know what? My wife was asking me that this morning, and I couldn't remember either. I remember when we did the Cambridge program, right, the PKP program, which I actually now do with UVU students. I know that our rooms were pretty close to each other. I remember interacting a lot, and I know I asked you for help in one of the classes at one point, so thank you for that. Yeah, it was after that moment, I think, that I remember us really kind of bonding.
And I think in the history department at BYU, there was a group of us who got just really nerded out on all kinds of philosophy and history, and we had that whole historiography thing we had. So I think we were bonded by ideas.
So this is also a reunion of sorts. Thank you again, Greg, for introducing Tara.
My pleasure.
And I'll turn over to Tara now and begin with some of the questions. Some of these questions are from me and some from our students. So I have described Educated as a book about creating a self, defining what family means, and leaving a literal and metaphorical home. Tara, what is missing in this description?
Oof. Well, I mean, I have a policy. I never correct anybody when they tell me what the book is about, even if they are describing something that I completely don't recognize, because I think that's what stories are for. People take them and they make out of them what they need. And so, I wrote this book because I'd had this kind of complicated upbringing. I had to make some really difficult decisions as I got older about what I was going to do with my relationship with my family. What was I going to do? When the older I got, I felt like I was going to have to make a choice between what it meant to be loyal to myself and what it meant to be loyal to my family. And that was for me a really difficult choice to make. I think for anybody that has to make that choice, it's pretty difficult. And it took me a lot of years to make it, and it took me a lot of years to process it. And so I wrote this book to help other people who might be trying to think through what that means for them. And so whenever people come up to me and they say, oh, the book is this, the book means this, I always think, well, for them, it's nothing to do with me in some ways. It's about them at that point. And that's what I think stories are for.
So it's an issue of what resonates with the readers. A lot of this book obviously is about education, and there is a scene towards the end where you look in the mirror and your old self is gone, the one controlled by your father, and the new self you described as a self that makes different choices. And you said something very powerful about education, and I will quote you. You could call this selfhood many things: transformation, metamorphosis, falsity, betrayal. I call it an education. So looking back and also looking at where you are today, how would you define broadly the word education?
Oh my goodness, you're leading with all these really easy questions. Just kidding. These are really hard questions. How would I define education? I mean, I think I've defined it a bunch of different ways. I think it's one of those things that it lends itself to a lot of different contexts. But I would say it's getting access to a lot of different points of view and using that wealth of knowledge and information and perspective to try to build your own mind in some meaningful way. And I think all our world for us, our families make our world for us in a real way. And then part of what it means to grow up is trying to figure out what you think versus what your parents think, in a way that is neither wholly agreeing with them just because they're your parents or wholly disagreeing with them just because they're your parents, and I think it's very difficult to figure out who you are. And I think for some people it's even harder than others. If you have a complicated set of family relationships, if you have any kind of abusive situation in your family, the effects of that make it even harder, I think, to start developing anything like a sense of self and an idea of like, where do I end and other people begin? And what are the obligations that I owe to the people who made me and took care of me? And how do I reconcile what I owe to them with what I owe to myself? And for me, that was potent because what I wanted for myself, to go to college, to go to Cambridge and do all these things, was pretty much in opposition to what my parents and especially what my father wanted for me. And it wasn't always possible for me to make choices that resonated with him and that he liked and that I also wanted. And that's just something I had to struggle with, and a lot of the book is about that.
Mm-hmm. Now, back to this theme of education, there's actually a student question from Austin Nielsen. And I think this kind of looks at the informal education that you had growing up in Idaho and then your formal education. So Austin asks, how has your unique background without formal education shaped your life? Do you imagine that you would have done things differently if you had a formal education, I suppose from the beginning, if you'd gone to kindergarten and first grade and so on? So talk about the juxtaposition of the informal and formal education.
I mean, I'm not great at counterfactuals. It's always very hard to go back and see what your life would have been like if you'd had a different life. I mean, it's impossible for me to say that, actually. I can't. I would love to be able to answer that question. And the reality is there is no answer to that question. And I think for any person that has a life, which is most of us, you have to reckon with the life you have, and it's always very tempting to say, well, what if I'd had different parents, or what if I'd had more money, or what if I lived in a nicer neighborhood, or what if I'd gone to a nicer school, or what if I hadn't had these challenges? And I think it's just helpful to a friend said to me recently, a friend who had a really difficult upbringing had said to me recently that she'd realized that so many things about the way she was, they were not her fault, but they were her responsibility. And I think, I don't know, I've never thought a whole lot about what would my life have been like if I had gone to school. A little bit, I had moments of it, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer. Maybe everything would have turned out really, really differently. I just had the one life.
Yeah, but I like what you said, that the counterfactuals are hard to kind of define. So moving from the counterfactual to the factual, this is a combined question from Joseph Stout and Austin Keller. How has education changed your perspective on religion? And when your understanding of modern education was changing, as well as your belief about what you could become, what became the source of morality?
Well, I think that if you read history, philosophy, there's all kinds of different ways to think about why you should treat people well and what are the criteria for doing that. I mean, I think for me, an ethic that was based around treating people well and not causing suffering unnecessarily always made a lot of sense to me once I encountered it. Thinking about anything from Kant's imperative, treat people as an end and never as a means to an end, and things like that. I think to me just made an intuitive sense when you think about how to organize the world. And anytime you have a question in your life about how to treat someone, I think thinking about those kinds of questions is really important. But I think religion is one of those things that I think if you are struggling with it, it's good to just give yourself time. I was raised in a really, really devout family, like Mormon, but way more extreme than mainstream Mormons. I wouldn't even really say that the religion my parents practice is mainstream Mormonism at all. And it took me a really long time to figure out, okay, what do I believe versus what my parents believe, and trying to suss out how not to be disappointment to them in that area while still being honest with my. And that to figure out. And I think if you're someone who's struggling with what your beliefs are versus what your family's beliefs are and what you owe them, I think give yourself a good chunk of time to sort out. Those are big questions.
Thank you. So at UVU, we actually teach ethics as part of general education. Maybe I want to ask you, how can we do this better? So we do teach it, but are there other things you've found that really helped you open your own mind as you began to expand, the definition of morality and right and wrong and how we treat one another?
I've never studied pedagogy, so anybody who actually teaches should take anything I say with a cup of salt, not saying just get the cup measurement out. But I would say I'm interested in methods of education where people get to make meaningful choices about what they learn. I think, there were a lot of things that were wrong with the way that my parents, I think, perceived education, and especially how they executed it. It was pretty, it was a little bit, what's the word, I guess, haphazard. Mm-hmm. But I think one thing that I did appreciate was I always felt like my education was mine in some meaningful way. And I think sometimes we give people a pretty passive idea of what an education is. And when people think about education, they think of like exams and workbooks and all these kind of bureaucratic things. And they get told what to read and what to study. And in as much as it's possible, a lot of my most meaningful experiences with education came from when I got to make a choice of what I was reading and what I was learning. And
okay. So it is important, and I think there are many students on this call. I think it is important what you said just now, that there's a certain independent view to curating education, making it as broad as possible, because as you said earlier, in education means exposure to a very broad range of ideas and ways of thinking. There's another question here from a student, from Christian Uribe. And it pivots a little bit into how education is changing today. How do you think technology and the digital world will change education and how we learn? How should we as students change to better learn in this kind of environment? And I know you said you're not in pedagogy, but I want to add to this question, because I think technology is not just how we consume education today, but also how we conduct discourse. So, social media is part of that. There's all of these things coming at us, and we're living in a very charged political environment, arguably with technology exacerbating the extremes. So here at the university, and taking your own experience and expertise, what are some of your thoughts for students and administrators and faculty to navigate this kind of environment today?
Technology, yeah. Technology. I think it's, there's a movement that's starting to gain some traction now that is trying to help people understand that we've surrounded ourselves with these devices, I think especially our phones, but also our laptops, that are not, they do not have the agenda that you have, and I think that's a hard thing to kind of get your mind around, is that there's something that you spend all of your time with, that you use to do many things that you want to do, useful things that you want to get done, calling friends, making appointments, paying for things. But this object that you have, and I've got mine right here, doesn't want you to do what you want to do necessarily. Like, you might want to do your homework and pass your class and go to grad school and see your friends, and your phone does not want you to do any of those things. Your phone wants you to sit and look at your phone. That's what your phone wants you to do. And all the people that are running the phone and designing the apps and figuring out specifically what will upset you, because if you're upset, if they can get you really mad, you'll spend more time on your phone. What excites you, what are you attracted to, what do you hate, what disgusts you, anything that they can figure they can trigger in your brain to get you to stay looking at that phone, they are gonna leverage that. And I think that's we're all gonna have to reckon with that all of us have this thing in our lives that we spend all of our time with, that is constantly trying to undermine what we would want to do if we were not being manipulated by this thing. And I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I think you can try to have healthy boundaries that. That's tricky. The world's not designed anymore for people not to have smartphones. But I think it has to start with awareness. It has to start with thinking about, if you got up in the morning and told yourself, how much time do I want to spend on my phone today, versus how much time do I want to spend talking to my friends in person or on the telephone versus chatting with them or sending text messages or photos, versus what your day actually turns into. I think just noticing that difference. I think for my part, what interests me about technology is just that I think it underrepresents reality. Data can do many, many wonderful things, but it always is an oversimplification of reality. And I think there's a danger when we start to identify with our online selves, our Instagrammable self, the person that we put on the internet. We identify with that almost more than we identify with our real kind of physical selves. And I think you are going to be identifying with a much less interesting version of yourself, like a less interesting, less nuanced, less complicated, just worse in every possible way version. I mean, it might look a little better if you've got some nice filters on it or whatever, but in every other way, worse. And I think there's danger in living your life through a mechanism that cuts you off from 95% of what makes you interesting. And so that's the thing I would try to have people think about. I mean, it's a bit ridiculous. You think about a Facebook profile as a representation of a human being is a perfectly absurd thing. Like, that's not a human being. It's not even close. It's a really quite boring representation of what a human being. If you took all the most boring things about a person, that's a Facebook profile. And like actual people are quite interesting. So it's worth thinking about how much of your life do you want to live through this avatar that is so profoundly lacking in uniqueness, depth, context, which is the things that people actually do quite well. So that's my rant about technology. Is like, don't live your life in something that cuts you off from everything that makes you interesting. It's a waste of time.
It's a really great rant, and actually, there's a question about the commencement address you gave about the uninstagrammable self, and this question is coming from Erica Heltson. And in that commencement speech, I actually listened to it last night, where you said the shared self is not our real selves. We become alien to ourselves, and you began with that very powerful anecdote about your graduation picture. And you said everything of significance you do in your life will be done by your uninstagrammable self, referring to the hard work we do, the substantive experiences that our boorish selves may be going through. So the question from Erica is, she says that the uninstagrammable self, that phrase really resonated with her. And she says, I am wondering if you have ever suffered from imposter syndrome and how you've dealt with that.
Yeah, I definitely did. I think it happens to people from time to time that you only identify with the parts of yourself that that you think are admirable or acceptable in some public way, and you kind of alienate from yourself all those things that aren't. And I think imposter syndrome is very easy to get into a new environment, a new class, a new school, and think that you don't belong there. And you don't have to have been raised by survivalists in the mountains to feel that way. Actually, a lot of people feel that way. I think most freshmen feel that way. And it's a sign of growth. It means you're growing. It means you're changing. It means you're stretching. And that's all good. But I think the point I think about when I gave that speech about the uninstagrammable self, that if I was trying to link that to imposter syndrome, which I haven't ever tried to do before, which I'll try to do, but I think it has to do with not being quite so quick to cut yourself off from parts of yourself, even if they're weaker parts of yourself, even if they're imperfect parts of yourself. I read recently this quote that I really liked that was, and I'm going to mangle it, but it was something like, mental health is a kind of continuing process of clinging to reality at all costs. And I think a lot of times the things that we're really afraid of, like, well, what if I'm bad at chemistry, so I can't even take chemistry because I don't want to find out that I'm bad at. Well, so what if you're bad at chemistry? Like, maybe you take chemistry and you find out you're bad at it, and can you live with that knowledge? But you might actually learn something that's really great and makes your life richer and makes you more interesting. And if you are too afraid of finding out, oh, I might have a weakness here, so you never try new things, you're making your life duller and less interesting, and you're cutting yourself off. But you'll still benefit from some exposure to it. I assume. I was actually quite bad at chemistry. This is all theoretical. But I just think sometimes that desire to only identify with the strongest, best things that we know how to do. You know, I only take art classes because I'm good at art, and I don't take math classes because I'm bad at math. You're cutting yourself off from like wonderful, interesting things. And if you could face the truth, and if you were comfortable having weakness, a lot of wonderful things would come into your life.
I really love that. Thank you for saying all of that. It reminds me of this Buddhist concept of the beginner's mind, you know, just being open without judgment and not clinging to these versions of ourselves and our realities that we tell ourselves is the real thing, but it isn't. I want to shift gears a little bit to ask you some questions about your personal journey. And there's a bit in your narrative that resonated with me as a female narrative, the narrative of a woman. So I want to discuss the topic of money, because I talk about this with my students. There's a scene in the book where you needed $1,400 for some horrible thing with your teeth, and your bishop persuaded you to finally get some financial aid. And you said in the book, I'd believe the money would be used to control me. So you did get that financial aid from government, and all your life you were told that was a bad thing. I believe the money would be used to control me, but what it did was enable me to keep my word to myself. For the first time, when I said I would never work again for my father, I believed it. I wonder now if the day I set out to steal the tax return needed for the financial aid wasn't the first time I left home to go to Bucks Peak. Could you elaborate on this experience a little bit, and also talk more in general about money and maybe women and your observations about how we should think about it, how we should go about it?
Well, that story that you mentioned, I think I needed a root canal was basically what happened. And I was in a lot of pain, and it was hard for me to focus on my classes, and I just didn't have the money. I didn't have it. Yeah. And I was working a bunch of jobs, and I was barely able to make rent, and then this thing happened, and I couldn't even function. I was in a lot of pain. And I had this poor bishop, I'm talking to you, UVU audience, so you probably know what a bishop is, but I always clarify for people who don't, it's like the Mormon equivalent of a pastor. But this poor bishop, first he tried to give me the church's money, and I wouldn't take it because I was told that was bad. And then he tried to pay it out of his own checkbook. Like, he brought his own personal checkbook and said, I'll just pay for it, and I wouldn't take that. I had some independence issues I need to work on, and let's just say. And then he spent several months trying to convince me to apply for a FAFSA, which I'd just been raised in a family that anything from the government was not okay, and you were participating in socialism and all this stuff. So I didn't think I could take it, and eventually things got bad enough, and I was persuaded, and I got this check in the mail, I remember, for $4,000, because I got it for 2 semesters because it was the spring. And that changed my life. That money changed my life more than any money I will ever get in my life. It was astonishing what a difference that. I remember I was so overwhelmed by it. I actually tried to call the FAFSA people and ask them. I said it was too much money. I tried to call them and say, I only need $1,400. So I was afraid of them. That much money actually frightened me. And I called them and said, will you take it back? I only need $1,400. And the woman on the phone thought I was a crazy person, which seems fair. And I was so overwhelmed by it. But I think the long-term effect of it was that I was able to focus on other things besides whether I could get a 4th job, or whether I could borrow money, or whether I could sell plasma, or the amount of mental space that was taken up in my life by trying to cobble together enough money for rent was like 80% of my mental capacity, at least. And I think what I've learned since then is that what money is, what it really is, the advantage it gives you is the ability to think of other things besides money. That's what it is. And for people who don't have enough of it, it becomes very difficult to have anything like natural curiosity, to read books that aren't assigned. It just becomes, because they're so caught up in survival. You asked me specifically about being female, and that it's what came to my mind. I don't know if it's what you had in mind, but is when they were making a study guide for my book, I remember they wrote a couple questions about toxic masculinity, because there are definitely some men in my book who don't behave super great. Let's say that. And so they wanted to do these questions about toxic masculinity. So we'll put a question in about toxic masculinity. I think we also have to acknowledge that in as much as there were men in my life who did terrible things, and there were also men in my life who did great things. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in focusing on all the ways that masculinity can be toxic, we forget that there are wonderful roles that can be played by these people. I went to a university where almost all of the faculty were men. That was just the reality. And if there hadn't been some of them who took an interest in me, even though I was female, even though whatever, and were little feminists in their own way, I would never have received the benefit that I did. So even this Mormon bishop, who for some people would be a kind of archetype of conservatism and all of that, ended up playing this incredible role in my life that I'll always be really grateful for. And so, people are complicated. They're not just the one thing. And so I think that if you live in a place, or you're in a mindset where you're thinking a lot about just, men do all this damage, it's worth thinking about there's just as much potential there for a positive effect.
Thank you for saying that. Actually, I would say in my own life, all of my mentors, my life mentors, have been men as well. So thank you for underlining that people are more complicated than we might sometimes think, and that it is an educated and a compassionate viewpoint to view people that way. And for money, yes, amen to that. Money buys you freedom. And I've said to our freshmen at Freshman Convocation this August that asking for help when you need money or other things, asking for help is a sign of strength. Again, another question, maybe this one on family. Something profound that I heard somebody said once is we are all the products of what our parents did and didn't do. And so when you look at your self-made self, how would you describe, the legacy that your parents gave you in terms of what they did and didn't do?
Ooh, that's a big question. I mean, I don't even think I could answer that. Like the whole legacy, I mean, it's a whole lot of things. I think they gave us curiosity. I think they gave us a devotion to hard work. I think they gave us, a belief that we were responsible for our lives and our learning in some real way. I think these are all the good things that they gave us. I think that there was another kind of inheritance, though, that was less good, that has a lot to do with some emotional problems from just being raised in such a stressful, dysfunctional environment. My family struggled a lot with violence and other kinds of abuse, and we did not in any way navigate that successfully and heal from it. And that's a choice we made. I mean, families don't have to deal with it that way, but mine did. And I think that's a different kind of inheritance. And I think the reality is we all have some kind of inheritance like that from our families, even pretty functional families. You're going to have some kind of emotional inheritance. And I'm not an expert in this field, but I've been reading a little bit more about it, about what happens in people's brains when they're young and the ways that we dissociate from ourselves, that we lose certain parts of our brain don't fire the way they would if we'd had certain needs met when we needed them. And that can be a pretty bleak story to tell, actually, to realize like, oh, there's parts of my brain that just aren't working because I didn't get what I needed when I was 2. That's hard to deal with. But the reality is, even that inheritance doesn't have to be permanent. And there are ways to address and deal with those things. And I'm just kind of at the very beginning of understanding what those ways are. I'm very interested in it, but I haven't fully grasped it. I know I've benefited a lot from just even basic things like therapy, like talk therapy, which when I was 20, the idea that I would have ever seen a therapist, I thought, I was in child of Idaho, I thought all of that was ridiculous and people sitting around talking about their problems. Just work harder. That's the answer. Just work harder. Yeah. And it took me a while to realize, a little bit like what I said about technology earlier, which is there are probably in a lot of us parts of ourselves, human parts of ourselves, emotional parts of ourselves that we have shut down at one point or another because we needed to. And you can live the rest of your life that way with them shut down. You can live the rest of your life playing with half the deck, or if using a musical metaphor, with playing with only a couple of keys. You can do that, but I don't know why you would. You might as well reclaim those parts of yourself and get access to the full range that you have. You might as well. It's going to be annoying and a lot of work, and there's not a shortcut. I think a lot of us, and sooner rather than later, you could do it when you were 70, but again, I don't know why you'd wait.
It's thank you so much for saying that. For a very long time, therapy, many people would see that as shameful. You're not strong enough. You're not, navigating your life well enough. But I think there's something to be said about enhancing our self-awareness. So thank you for sharing that.
I think I learned is that the problem wasn't that I wasn't strong enough. In some ways, it was almost I was too strong, in the sense that I was able to just shut down whole parts of myself. That was the way I dealt with it. And I was at no risk of not being strong enough, but I was in a lot of risk of just losing touch with myself. That I was in a lot of risk of. And so I think sometimes we think asking for help and dealing with those kind of emotional inheritances, we think it's about strength. And I think it's about something else. It's about getting access to yourself again, which is a very different it's a very different thing to be pursuing than strength.
And I think what it makes me think of when you talk is just that awareness again, enhancing our our own awareness. But I think it is very humbling when you talk about this, because I'm a parent of three. And frankly, nothing's more frightening to me than being a parent, because I know now that my children are going to need therapy. And then on the other hand, as the child, as the recipient of how your parents raised you, there's also that very humbling thing that you may have been shut off from these other parts of yourself that you really want to access and need to access later on. There is a question here from Juliana Gibson, and this is more with the book itself. What made you decide to share your story? Also, how did you start writing? I mean, assuming this process has got to be a little bit complex. Our lives are so complex, and I'm sure you had a lot of decisions to make to decide what to include and what not to include. How did you know where to start?
I wanted to write the book, I think, after I'd gone through this really difficult of becoming estranged from some members, not all members of my family, but from some members of my family. And I just felt really isolated after that happened. I mean, what I realized, because I paid a lot of attention in that period of my life, not willingly, I just couldn't help myself, to movies and advertising and books. And I found it uncommon to find someone who was talking openly about that experience of estrangement. And what do you do? What happens when you decide, in order to take care of myself, I need to distance myself from some of these people, even people that I love, like people that I really miss every day. And I still think I can't really have them in my life. And I really wanted to find people talking about this or explaining to me what it was, what it was like to go through it, why they'd made the choices they made. Again, that role of stories. What are stories for? So we can read what other people do and decide what we think about what they did and what we want to do. You know, that's what they are. And I found it so hard to find stories like that that I resonated with. You know, I think you had a lot of reconciliation narratives where it was like love conquers all and everything works out in the end. And I felt like, well, that doesn't really work for me because I don't have control over what other people do. And I don't have control if my family chooses I think it's bad for me to keep in my life, and I can't control what they do. So that doesn't work for me. The reconciliation is not something I have power over. And then the other kind of narratives, I think often written by when people were much older, kind of just about all the dysfunction in their lives, which are really valid and probably helpful, but they weren't as helpful to me because I hadn't reached any kind of end of my life perspective on things. You know, I wasn't happy that I was estranged from my parents. I felt like where I was with my parents was more like, it was just confused, and it was more like, oh, these just wonderful people. I love them so much, and I just need to get the hell away from them. Like that was where I was at, and I loved them, and I wanted to be with them, and they were my family. They were everything I knew, and I had somehow made this decision to step back from them. And I didn't find narratives like that. I didn't find people who were kind of in the moment trying to work out what to do. And I think estrangement at the end of your life looks really different when you're struggling with it, 'cause it's something that takes years and you live with it for a long time. And so this is a rambling answer. I'm going to come to a point here, I promise. But I think I wanted to write the book because I wanted so badly to read the book when I was going through that. I just wanted someone to explain to me what this was and what they had done and how they felt. And so how I started writing, I just started writing. I opened a Word document. I wrote a bunch of things. They were pretty bad, actually. I took them to an amateur writing group on Brick Lane in London and was told immediately by all the people that it was very bad. And they were not mean. I mean, they were mean, but they were also right. It was very bad. And I just kept going and kept reading what I'd written, and they kept telling me it was bad, and it got better eventually. And I wrote something. Eventually I wrote something that I understood the point of it. And I thought, oh, I understand why this might be useful. And so then I kept going. But, you know, the first 6 months or so, I just wrote absolute, it was just dribble. You know, it was really, really bad. I had no idea how to write this kind of book, and I just had to learn.
That reminds me of a line from Anne Lamott, you know, in her book Bird by Bird, where she says there's the shitty first draft, and you have to live with it and just keep going. So there's a line from the book that I love about your narration. You said, "My life was narrated for me by others, Their voices were forceful, emphatic, absolute. It had never occurred to me that my voice might be as strong as theirs. So I really love that, at the end of the day, finding that voice. There's an easy question here from a student that I'm going to ask, but I have to get the student's name, Matthew Johansson. What books have you been reading lately?
What books? I don't know if you've noticed from just listening. I've been reading a lot of technology books about the effect of social media. I read the recent book by the New Yorker writer Andrew Marantz that came out last year. I've read some stuff about the attention economy. I've also really recently been reading psychology books, like I'm very interested in, and that's why it's given me a new language that I didn't have before, and it's been interesting for me, having never read anything really about these topics, to read them and then look at the language I was using when I was trying to describe these phenomena in the book, and I didn't have this kind of technical language. Now I would say from some of the scenes, I would say, oh, I was dissociated from myself. I lost the ability to know what I was thinking or feeling. That line that you say in there, that you just quoted, is exactly that. I was used to looking to other people to tell me what was going on and how I felt, and I didn't check in with myself ever. I checked in with other people compulsively, and now I know, oh, that's just something that happens to people who've had traumatic experiences. And there's a name for it. It's called dissociation. I didn't know that, and I've learned all this weird stuff about why that happens, what's part of the brain shut. It's very interesting, but so I've been reading that, and not for any reason, like I got interested in it. And I think it's inherently interesting when you read something that is a technical description that is just in these, bloodless language, like the hyperactive of the amygdala or whatever, or the frontal lobe shuts down. You're like, oh, I know. Yes, that is me. They are describing me. And it's a weird thing to feel seen by like a neuroscience. It's very weird. I'm still working it out. And that kind of process of learning to identify, not with just the things that we think of with ourselves, like, oh, what kind of music do I like? What kind of food do I like? And do I like Thai food or Mexican food? But like, how does my brain work? To what degree do I overreact in certain situations? And to what degree how do I respond to people? It's a very different way of getting to know yourself. And I got interested in it when I read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman a year or two ago. And you discover that your brain has all these kind of wonderful capacities, but also has some pretty big especially statistical holes, that we just all fall into these same traps. And it's very interesting, I think, getting to know yourself that way from a neuroscience perspective. How do you function as an organism? But I wouldn't necessarily say everyone should go read these. I just really like it. But everybody's got their interest.
But I think it is very empowering to even find a word to describe some things that you observe about yourself. I'm gonna call Associate Provost for Engaged Learning, Dr. Cheryl Hanovitz, because I know we have questions from the audience. I still have a ton of questions, but let's have some questions from our audience now. So come on over, Cheryl, and why don't you just read a first question from what we've received here to Tara.
Sure, thank you. The first question we have here is from Gabby Rivas, and she asks, I've recently read your book and was wondering, where did you find the strength to confront your father and brother and say, I want this in my life?
These are okay. I had a lot of things in my life. Been able to go to Cambridge, and I had a wonderful 4 years at BYU. I'd met good friends like Greg, who were really helpful, and I should say Professor Jackson. Yes. And I had a good other world built, and I think having built that other world, it was thinkable to me to start to ask some questions about that first world, and ask some questions like, if I can't make this a safe space, do I still want to stay there? And that was I think if I hadn't had another world to retreat into, I don't know as though I would have been able to ask that question. I mean, my whole childhood, my upbringing, it just was what it was. The people were what they were. The relationships were what they were. It never have occurred to me, no matter how bad things got. And I had an older brother who was very violent, and we had a very destructive relationship. But it never would have occurred to me to even think that anything else was possible. That was just my life. That was the only one there was. But I think as I got older and I had this other little colony, this little colony that was established at first at Purdue and then at Cambridge, I had a little bit more perspective to start asking, what do I do if I can't, if I want to create boundaries for myself that say, okay, no more physical violence. I don't want to be called the names I've been called. I don't want to have the kind of relationships I've had previously. And if I can't change them and make them better, what do I do with them? And I don't think I could have done that without having another little world to go to.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Megan Paul Freeman, and she says, what is your relationship with your family currently?
So I'm estranged from about half my family, and that includes my parents. And whenever you tell people that, well, it used to be that I would have to tell people that because they didn't know, and now it feels like everybody knows, which is weird on another level. It's weird on a whole other level. But I think people always assume, there's a tendency to assume that the goal should always be reconciliation. And for a lot of people, that probably is true. But I think for me, I think the estrangement has been a really healthy, good thing. I think that was the right answer for me. I don't say it's the right answer for everybody. I have no idea what the right answer is for everybody. But I think for me, accepting the fact that I actually had no control over what other people did. I don't have control over whether they change. I don't have control over whether they're healthy. I don't have control over whether they're violent or mad. I don't have control. And the only decision I could meaningfully make is, do I want this in my life? And that was the decision I ended up making. And I think that decision of estrangement is a really personal thing, and where people go with that is entirely going to be unique from person to person. But I would say there's about half my family I'm on very good terms with, and my aunts and uncles and cousins and everything like that. But there's about half my immediate family that I maybe email with, but I try to limit the contact because it's just seems better for me over.
Great. So Kristen Smith asks, I'd love to hear Tara's feelings on effective ways to deal and set and keep boundaries with toxic people with whom you cannot, for various reasons, completely break ties.
Oh yeah, effective ways. Yeah, good thinking. Well, there's something we've been talking a little bit in this event about, which is keeping tabs on yourself, which is hard to do. And it was hard for me because I'm so used to disassociating with how I feel that it was a really difficult muscle for me to get back online, to kind of just check in with myself and how do I feel as I move forward with some kind of interaction with someone that I know is going to end badly. And so good luck. You can try to get in touch with yourself. That's a good goal. But I think another way to do that, if you find that that's really hard, I think a friend, maybe two friends, is probably like anything that you want to change in your life. If you want to eat less of a certain food, or you want to give up some unhealthy habit, or you want to adopt some healthy habit, I think everything I've read and everything my own experience is having a person in your life that you explicitly explain the situation to and say, I want to stop drinking 5 cans of Coke every day, or whatever it is. And you tell them, and you call them when you are struggling. And I do this with difficult people in my life. I have a couple of friends, and something I don't know, I call them and we talk through it, and they play a couple of useful roles for me. One thing, they give me perspective on the whole thing, which I don't always have because a lot of things are normalized for me that are not probably super healthy. So my alarm bells go off really late. And a friend can actually help you navigate that. They can help you navigate it with your family. They can help you navigate it with your love life. They can tell you when something is wrong when you maybe can't quite tell. And I think and they also help you check in with yourself. A good friend, someone that you have a good relationship with, can help you excavate how you feel and can help you get in touch with that again. And so I benefited a lot from that. And then you also should do that for them. Reciprocation, it's good. Otherwise, you won't have a friend for very long. So you should probably think not just about how they can help you, but how you could help them. That's always better.
Or pay a therapist.
Right. Well, that really resonates.
I'm a big advocate for therapy. there's no substitute for a good friend.
Yes, I would agree. Our next question actually comes from a student outside of UVU, Joseph Andon Shepard. Hi, Tara. I'm a current BYU senior who comes from an extremely similar background as yours and similarly excelled in school. How did you know what you wanted to do with your life afterward?
No, I didn't. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, and it's not getting easier. I don't know. I mean, I tried to figure out what I liked doing and how I felt when I did certain things, and I think paying attention to how you feel when you do certain things is as good a proxy as any. But I think, it's a difficult time. I don't know if anyone's noticed, but it's been a weird year. It was kind of a weird decade, and then we really just outdid ourselves in 2020. I found a card the other day that a friend had sent me, and it was so funny. I laughed for 20 minutes. All the card said was, "Hi, Tara, I'm so glad that you're in my life, and here's hoping for an even better 2020. This was clearly sent on New Year's Eve 2019. And I just looked at it, the most basic mess, and I laughed for like 5. I took a picture of it, I sent it to him. Isn't this hysterical? And you just think about how we were all in 2019 just thinking everything was fine. And then everything got kind of bleak. But so it's a weird time. And I think part of that is you're going to want to give yourself a little slack and a little time. And the world right now is difficult. Like, there's economic realignment, you got automation, you got all this, like, things are changing and it's difficult. And the world might kick you around a little bit, but you don't need to kick yourself around. So I think if you're having trouble figuring out what you want to do, like, join the club. Pretty much everybody is in that boat. And give yourself time to figure it out. And don't compound a difficult situation with, self-cruelty.
Yeah,
One more.
Yes, in fact, this one comes from high school students. You have quite a fan base here in Utah from all walks of life, and this is great that we have high school students joining us as well. This is from Alex Gold. If Tara is willing, I would love to hear her school reading advice to my 8th grade English class at Vista Heights MS in Saratoga Springs.
I love that.
Full reading advice?
Pardon?
Sorry, what was it that they wanted?
Yes, her school reading advice for her 8th grade English class.
Like what to read? Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, well, here's what you do. What you should do is, it's kind of hard right now. All the bookstores are closed. What you should do is you should get hold of like 10 books and read the first couple of pages and then read the one that you want to keep reading. And just like do that for the rest of your life. Because that, read things that speak to you more or less. I have friends who read every book no matter what, and I can see that there's some argument for that. I personally, I think there's some value in exposing yourself to things that you're not naturally drawn to, but I'm a big believer in paying attention, trying to figure out what you actually like. And there's so many wonderful books out there. There are more books that will just make your heart sing than you will ever get to read. So go find them, just read a bunch of them and refine that instinct that you have for what you're drawn toward. And, you do that by exposing yourself to a bunch of different things. So I would say any reading list that is made for you by someone else is inferior to the reading list that you make for yourself. Likely to actually look at a bunch of books, make a list of what you want to read based on what you like. And you're way more likely, like any curriculum that you make for yourself is going to be better than one that is made for you. So to teachers, I guess I would say, in as much as you can give your students that opportunity to read something and decide whether they want to keep reading. I mean, what an important decision. Do I want to keep reading this book? Is a good reading list.
I just want to say that's like going to the ice cream shop and then you say, can I taste, that flavor? And I love that method, which I implement, of reading the first 5 to 10 pages and then deciding to buy.
Everything was so passive, so we we give kids this idea that their life is theirs when it comes to ice cream or the color of their shoelaces, but the life of the mind is just totally passive, and you don't get any say, and you just do what other people tell you. And then we are annoyed that kids don't experience education as joyful and discovery. And I think, well, we could make it a little bit more like that. We could make the process of deciding what book to read next exciting. If we wanted to, we could do that. And so often I think we don't. We take that out of it. And every time you go to the ice cream, you have to get mint chocolate, and until someone decides to give you vanilla, until someone decides. And I think reading and learning is a lot like going to an ice cream shop. It's figuring out what feels good to you, what feels exciting. And that's another muscle that you have to learn to develop, is like that things that you're drawn toward, and learning how to recognize those things. And it sounds so easy, and it's actually kind of hard.
Thank you. I think we have 5 minutes, and I promised my team here that I would ask this question that they're kind of dying to ask you. Is it true that the book is going to be made into a movie?
I mean, I haven't sold the film rights, so that would be rather shocking if it were. I haven't completely ruled out selling them, but I haven't taken any meaningful steps towards selling them either. And I've had a lot of offers, and I just haven't taken anyone up on them. And I don't know why. I have to really work out my own feelings about that. I think it's something I would want done in a certain way, and I don't know how to do that myself, and I don't know how to let go of it and let anybody else do it either. And I'm afraid of it being something that I don't recognize. So I gotta figure that out for myself. I'm working on it, but so far I haven't sold them, so there can't really be a movie. And the reason there can't is me. I'm a massive obstacle. So.
Okay, we will stay tuned. Maybe one last question, Cheryl.
Great, and this one comes from another high school student, Mateo Cruz. I'm a student at Pleasant Grove High School. I've been reading Tara Westover this term with my English class, grade 12. I'm wondering on some tips on how to write in unique ways.
Write in unique ways. I think that thing we were just talking about, which is learning how to distinguish between books that really speak to you and books that really don't, is this helpful advice. Sometimes I think we just tell people to read everything without paying a whole lot of attention to what works for them. And I think paying attention is pretty important. I also have my one bit of slightly unconventional advice, because I think you ask writers how to write, they're going to tell you the same things because they're good advice. Write every day, read a lot of books. Like, it's all going to be pretty much the same. The only thing I have to add to it that's different in any way is, I think, in addition to just reading a lot of books, it's worth reading a couple of books a lot of times. Like, I believe that the first time you read a really good novel or even a really good essay, you probably get the content maybe, or some of the content, but you're not going to really understand how that's built, how it holds together. How did they weave certain ideas? How did they foreshadow things? How did they get you thinking it was going to go in one direction and then pull it in the other in a way that was exciting for you, specifically for you? And I think that is just, that has more to do with study than with reading, actually. And so I would say studying other people's work, and really getting into it is probably my advice.
Thank you. I just want to double check. How much time do we have remaining? Oh, we have until 1 o'clock. Sorry, keep asking
okay.
questions, Cheryl.
Let us pull. Okay, this one's about Tara's personal journey from Carrie Bokweg. At what point in your journey did you decide you should write a book? I know you mentioned that a little bit earlier, but maybe expand a little bit.
I guess it was after my PhD. I finished it, and I was still kind of working through some of these big family questions, and what did my education meant? What did it cost me? And was it worth it? And what regrets did I have? And that I thought, yeah, maybe I could write about this. And the reality is, I was pretty uncomfortable with the idea of publishing it. I was pretty uncomfortable with the idea that anyone would ever actually read it. And I think it helped me to write the whole thing before I made a decision about whether I wanted to publish it. I think individually there's almost no chapter that I would really want out there in the world. But as a complete item or book or story, I felt more comfortable saying, I understand why this might be helpful, or why it was helpful for me to write it, or all these kind of complicated questions. Like when you put something personal like that into the world, it was a lot easier for me when I had the whole book. But individual chapters, yeah, my instinct was always to like burn them, put them under the bed, hide them forever.
Can I follow up on that a little bit? Journaling is a big thing in the culture here where we live. And you also used your journals in a way to have that narrative kind of become whole. So what would you advise to those? Like I have that feeling sometimes of burning my own journals. What's the use of these journals?
I think the use is going to be different for everybody. I think it's good to the degree that you are, I'll use my fancy lingo I've learned, to the degree that you're a dissociated person, and I think a lot of us are. We don't know it, because how do you know? That's kind of definitionally you don't know. I think journaling is this amazing thing where you sit down and you check in with yourself. It's the one moment of the day that you stop worrying about what does your boss think, or what does your partner think, or what do your kids think, what does your mom think, and keeping everybody happy. And you sit down and you think, what do I think about the situation? What do I feel about it? And I think it is a tremendous tool that we have to think about our lives, and are they going in the direction that we want them to, and do we want things to be different? And reading through them, what are the persistent things? I like to read my journals over at the end of the year and just look at what is something that I just couldn't let go and was just a constant problem for me, and can I address it in some way? But you can't do any of that if you are unaware of what you think and what you feel. And I think journaling is really good for getting back in touch with the person that we so often lose touch with, ironically, which is just ourselves. And so I'm a big believer in it. It's also terribly helpful if you're going to write a journal later, a memoir later, if you have like a lot of journals lying around that tell you what happened. So I think I like writing not just about my thoughts, feelings, whatever, but I also like to write about what I ate, what I did, who I saw. I like to just, what does my life look like, even just externally? If you followed me around for a day, what does my life look like? And it's amazing how interesting that becomes to you a year or two later. And I don't know why. Maybe it's narcissism, but I feel like it's something better than that.
Okay, thank you. Another question, Cheryl?
Yes, we have several more, but I love that answer as well, because you look back on your journal and it's like, who was I at that moment? So it's a really good way to follow up. Abigail Atkinson, what part of your upbringing has been most valuable that still helps you continue to progress today?
Good question. I think my parents, they really taught us to enjoy reading and to read difficult, complicated things. I mean, we were expected to read the Book of Mormon and the Bible from the time that we were really little. And I think that I am really grateful for, that I learned not just how to read, but to like reading. And also that just because something was difficult to understand didn't mean that it wasn't meant for me. Hard things and difficult things were meant for me, and I was meant to read them even if I didn't fully understand them. I'm really grateful for that, and I think it's had a really positive impact on me.
Okay. We have a question here from Jay Desart. What was underlying your family's animosity toward formal education?
What was underlying it? Good question. My dad had a lot of kind of paranoid ideas, mostly about the government, but really about anybody who lived differently than we did, which was almost everybody. So, I think that there was a kind of distrustfulness that was inherent in him. And I think a lot of people want to blame religion more. I've shied away from that interpretation, not because I would say religion was kind of the vehicle that my dad's extremism used. But I think I've speculated that it was a kind of mental illness. I think he was probably schizophrenic or bipolar. I'm not a professional, but that from the reading I've done, that makes the most sense to me. And I think that kind of fanaticism and fear. I mean, my dad was afraid of us thinking differently than he did. And so I think he wanted to control what we learned. And, people ask me all the time about homeschool. What do I think about homeschool? Is it bad? Is it good? And I I don't know. I mean, I have a brother who homeschools his kids, and they're the smartest kids, and they're really well adjusted. And but my brother homeschools his kids because he wants to give them access, and his wife, they want to give their kids access to everything there is, and then they want to let their kids figure things out. And so I think if you're thinking about homeschool and why to do it and why not to do it, I would say look at your motives. You know, if you want to homeschool your kids because you want to give them, you think you can give them access to more ideas and more perspectives and more information than the school, then I don't know, that could be a good thing. Think about what your capacity is for that. But if you want to homeschool your kids because you want to keep information away from them, you want to control what ideas that they get exposed to, I would say that probably has almost nothing to do with education, and that has a lot more to do with control. And it's worth thinking about what it means to be pursuing an education policy so you can control somebody else. Is probably worth thinking about why that would be good. It's hard to imagine why that would be good.
Yeah, and if I can just follow up with that, we have a number of students here who are homeschooled and then coming to college. Do you have good, I guess, advice for them on things they should be doing, maybe particularly as they do transition to college?
Yeah, I think probably for those people, if their experience is anything like my experience, friendships are going to be very important for you, and finding people in your life that you can talk to and you can watch and ask for advice, who will be close enough to you to notice when you need to be informed about something that you're not aware exists, you know, who can say to you, hey, it seems like you're struggling in this class. Maybe you should go talk to a professor. That never would have occurred to me when I entered college. It's like they were telling me to go visit the moon and ask the moon for help. I was like, are we allowed to talk to the professors? You crazy? And I think it was because I had people in my life who were there and could suggest what now seem like very obvious things. You know, oh, maybe you could go to the university counseling service. It's free. When you're a student, it's free. Amazing. You should definitely go. All these things that would never have occurred to me. And I think that having friends that can come into your world a little bit and you can come into their world a little bit. Human beings we're just wired for social learning. That's just how we learn. And you want to catch up fast. You want to learn how an institution works, even though you've never been in a school before. Attach yourself to someone. And, you're going to have to do that the old fashioned way. You're going to have to be like nice and charming and helpful back. So thinking about not just what you can offer, not just what people can offer you, but what you can offer them. And there's not a shortcut to friendship, unfortunately. But if you build good ones, they're going to help you as much as any class.
Great, I love that. Thank you. And then we have actually one here that came from several different. We have one from Seth Morris and Janice K. Similar question. I would be interested on your comments on your mother's newly released book, Educating.
I don't really have any. Do I have any comments? I don't have comments about that. Probably not a lot of comments. I guess I would say, my book, I made a kind of weird decision. My editor certainly thought it was a weird decision, where I put footnotes in my book of different parts of our family history that we shared that other people saw differently than I did. And, a lot of the reason I wrote my book is because my family had quite a lot of what we have this fancy term for called gaslighting, which is my family had a lot of something is happening and you're kind of immediately being told that it's not happening. So something violent happens and you're immediately told it's all a game. My older brother was particularly good at this, but my parents are pretty good at it too. And so because I grew up in a world where I feel like reality was always, it was not something I was entitled to so much as other people in my life would tell me when I was upset, or would tell me when something was bad for me, or would tell me if something was violence or if it was fun. It's sensitive to any kind of authoritarian view where you say my history is the only history that can exist. And I would just say, for the sake of consistency, I apply that to myself as well. And my version doesn't have to be the only version. And I'm really comfortable with the idea that there are other ways of looking at it. I mean, it's not my way of looking at it, but I think I think part of respecting yourself, actually, and your ability to have your own ideas is respecting other people's right for the same. So I don't really have a whole lot of comment about it, except, we all have our right to tell our own stories. And that's really all I have to say about it.
Okay, I think we have 2 more questions left. Is that?
Yes, go ahead. We still
Okay.
have time, and then there's probably one question from my list.
Okay, great. So this one comes from Aileen Laura. We know how your parents reacted to your book, but how did your siblings react to your book?
Mixed. I mean, my family's kind of split a little bit, where there's some people who are very much still living on the mountain with my parents, and they don't believe in doctors and hospitals, and they live in a way that I would consider to be kind of extreme. And I imagine that they share. I don't know. I haven't spoken to them about it, but I imagine they share my parents' reaction. And then there's another part of the family that includes some of my siblings, but also my aunts and uncles and cousins that are probably more recognizably mainstream Mormon, and they've been really supportive, and I wasn't expecting it when I wrote the book. I'd lost touch with a lot of them because of the nature of the family schism, and I was really grateful, especially to 2 of my aunts that just came back in my life in a really important way and were really helpful to me in that whole kind of healing, the whole healing nightmare that had to happen. And but it's mixed and it's complicated, and I think in a family like mine, it's a really difficult thing, because we were one of those families that the rule was definitely that you never talk about what's actually happened. You talk about the official version. And in my family, that was things like if something violent happens and somebody's wrist gets broken, you pretend like it wasn't violent, like it was an accident or like it was a game. And to come in my family and say, that's how you felt about it, but this is how I felt about it, is we don't have space for that. I think it's part of what's broken about our family culture is that we don't have space for that. We don't have space for everybody's internal experience, and we only have space for the kind of meta narrative that gets put in place after the fact. So it's tricky for all of us, I think, because I'm breaking a big rule in the family, which is not to talk about it. And I've tried to be as sensitive to the discomfort that has caused as I can be. But ultimately, I felt, and I still feel like it was important to do. And and with any kind of memoir writing that you do in your life, you're going to be trying to balance what you want to write about and what feels true to you and what feels helpful to you to other people with how it will impact people that you care about. And there's no easy answer to that question. And you can't pretend like it's easy. You can't absolve yourself of responsibility and pretend like it doesn't matter. It matters very much.
Okay, this is the last question, and I think it will be a very important one for the entire audience. And it comes from Mara Daly. As a clinical social worker student, I am very interested when, if at all, Tara can identify when it would have been most effective for intervention from her community.
I don't know. I'm so bad at counterfactuals, and people always want me to do them. I would say I received some pretty important intervention, and I'm grateful for it. I think about the people in my community when I was, how old was I? Probably around 10, and I joined this dance studio, and my parents wanted us to be completely covered, always, because they were very into modesty. And this poor woman made all the other children dance in like oversized sweatshirts that went to their knees. That was totally to accommodate me, and she could have just said, sorry, we're not doing it. But she did that because she recognized I didn't have a lot of opportunity to spend with kids in my own age, and she didn't want me to leave the dance class. So she made everybody else conform for me. And I had a piano teacher that I remember once called me when I was 15 or 16 and asked if she wanted me to sponsor her in a beauty pageant. I mean, I can't imagine anything that would have made my dad more upset than that, or would have suited my personality less. But it was kind of her, I mean, she was thinking of me, and she wanted to provide me ways to interact with the community. And I had a music teacher in the ward, a choir teacher who staged massive interventions. But when I say massive, I mean in the sense that she invited me over and talked to me. And I feel like I benefited a lot, actually, from people in that town who were aware of me and were trying to help. So I don't know what more could have been done. I'm grateful for what was done, and I feel like it made a big difference.
If I could follow up on that a little bit, I like the idea of intervention as not a clinical thing necessarily or something that comes from official authorities. Of course, there's room for that, but you've described intervention as exceptional care, which is a foundational value for Utah Valley University. In one part of the book, you've mentioned dance and music. I think you starred in a musical, I think it was Annie, and then I've also seen you sing online in videos where you've given talk. So talk a little bit about music and maybe that part of your education. What role has that played in your life, music or the arts? Because we try to encourage our students here to have breadth in their own lives.
Yeah. You know, what's funny is I have never had a good answer to that question, except to say the music made me more curious about the world. It made me want to go to college because I learned opera was it was apparent to me the first time I heard opera and choir, you had to go learn how to do this. No one was born knowing how to sing that way. And so I think it was the first thing that made me curious and want to leave the mountain. And so I taught myself algebra. I really did. I taught myself algebra because I like to sing. It's a very weird fact, but there it was. It was something I loved to do. And trigonometry and algebra were in the way, so I dealt with it. And so I think having a real love of something like that can take you all kinds of crazy places, because in the pursuit of it, you'll have to do other things. And that was useful. I think there was a motivating factor for me with music, but it's only lately, I mentioned I've been reading all these weird psychology books. Well, I shouldn't say weird, helpful and wonderful psychology books. And it's only as I've been reading them that I've realized how important music was probably important to me on a whole other level than what I've been aware of, which is to say there are certain things that we do in our lives that have a calming effect on us and connect us with ourselves. Like, there's a reason why people are trying to always get you to meditate. All those irritating people who are constantly trying to get you to meditate. There's actually a reason that they're trying to do that, which is that when you breathe slowly, it puts you in a calmer state of mind. And if you're someone who's got a lot of difficult relationships, or you've had some kind of traumatic experience, you might be stuck in some kind of overdrive response, and that's just bad for you. It's bad for your body, and it means that you're going to interact with people in a slightly hostile way because you're not calm when you are interacting with the world, and you can't learn. Your learning center's offline. All this stuff happens. So I would have said, music was important to me because I like to sing, and so it got me to university, which is true. It did do that, but the more I'm learning, the more I think, when I was a kid, I bet I sang to myself 15 hours a day. I mean, I just was always singing. And I think about the effect that probably just had on me physically. I mean, for one thing, you're checking in on yourself in a big way when you're singing, and it's very difficult to be upset when you're singing, actually, very difficult. And so I think it probably had a whole set of protecting factors. And that's why I'm really sad when you hear about, especially in poorer schools, that they cut music. I used to be thinking sports was kind of stupid, and what do we need sports for? People should read books. But now I'm a little more enlightened, and I've realized that there are these activities that we do that bring us into sync with the people around us, whether it's music, or whether it's, I don't know, kicking a football around. I don't really get that, but if it works for you, great. There are things that we do that are actually incredibly important for learning, and especially for kids growing up in tougher situations, to learn how to get in sync with a group of other people, musically or physically, or whatever way that means for them. And it's a real tragedy, I think, that in our quest to fix the education system, we are cutting the things out that are probably foundational for a lot of kids in terms of learning how to regulate their emotions and how to check in with themselves and how to connect with other people. And so I think we have to keep thinking about education as a whole person thing. You cannot teach someone trigonometry if they don't know how to calm themselves down. And so, yeah, I'm a fan of music. I'm a fan of a lot of things for that reason, that there's a physiological, psychological, neurological effect that they have. And it's important. We should pursue it. And meditate. All those annoying people telling you to meditate, they actually have a point.
Do it. My nephew says to me, use your breath. You already have it. You already know how to breathe. So just do it. But on the music side, I've heard you sing "Come, Come, Ye Saints" and "How Great Thou Art" online just last night as I was browsing. Is that a link as well to those moments of calm and kind of familiarity, maybe how would you describe that? You're still singing hymns.
I think for me, yeah, I think that's a lot of the music I sang when I was growing up, and not just alone, but with other people. And I think I experienced a lot of calm and joy and a lot of other emotions that I didn't experience a lot at home. And I experienced them in a church singing hymns with people. And I came, I think, to associate those feelings of calm and safety and all the rest of it with those hymns. And so when I sing, I do go back to those. I go back to them again and again. They're always, I think, going to have that kind of resonance for me.
Great. I also want to say, just with what Tara Westover has just said about the totality of experience at UVU, we have athletics, we have the Norda Center for the Performing Arts, and I hope after today's session, more staff, more students, more faculty will take advantage of all these wonderful things at the university that allows us to get in touch with other parts of ourselves. There's a question here from Braden Knudsen. What would you consider to be your biggest professional failure or setback? You're too young to have a biggest professional failure or setback, but in any case, it's about failure, and what did you learn?
I can look forward to my biggest failure in the future. I almost failed my PhD. That's true, very, very nearly, because I was having a mental breakdown. When I had this whole thing go down with my parents, and I suddenly was facing this estrangement, and I really fell apart. I mean, there's not another way to put it. I mean, I really came unglued. I was having panic attacks. I couldn't focus. I was depressed. I was watching TV, and I'd never been a depressed person. You know, I had a lot of difficulty in my life, but I'd never been depressed. I'd been freaked out. I'd been scared. I'd been disassociated with myself and almost statuesque and like a rock in terms of my ability to experience emotions, but I'd never been depressed. And then I was, and I just came apart. And for like 2.5 years, I did nothing really of any description to work on my PhD, which, considering that my PhD program was 3 to 4 years, was really bad. And I got to a place where I think my supervisor, really lovely, smart, genius man, pretty much just said to me, I don't know if you can do this. And if you can't do it, it's okay. But it might be time to give up on it. And I don't know, that annoyed me so greatly that I think I'd been going to therapy for a while at that point, and I was starting to bounce back a little bit. And I was able to actually finish. But I very nearly didn't. And it's not like I finished with a lot of published papers. You know, everyone else that I knew finished. They'd published all these papers. They'd gone to all these conferences. They were really well positioned to launch into academia. And I was not at all. And I think if I had been better positioned, I might have pursued it. I might have gone, and I would be writing some history essay right now about utopians in France. But because I'd done so badly on my PhD, I finished and thought, well, I can't really be an academic. What else could I do with my time? And I thought, well, I could try to write this weird little book. And so I did. And then now I do this. And I just think, in a way, it was a failure that worked out, you know, but it was a failure. There's no hiding it. I did not graduate super triumphantly for my PhD. I crawled over that finish line.
That's very encouraging to everybody who is still trying to finish their associate, bachelor's, master's, or PhD. It is doable. I want to ask you about the work you're doing now. This is a more academic question. So you've studied philosophy, historiography, and you're now a fellow at the Shorenstein Center at the Harvard Kennedy School. And you're looking at media and political polarization. How are you connecting the dots from the point of view of a scholar of what is happening, using, you know, all of these fields that you know? Media and political polarization.
I think right now I've been trying to get my head around the internet and how it seems to have changed so much. The internet, but also economics. I think we have a situation in the United States where the way that the economy works is so different across physical space. So certain kinds of cities tend to be doing well, and then certain kinds of rural or hinterland areas are really not doing well. And there's some exceptions to that, and it changes from place to place. But what we have is just a very geographic concentration in terms of economic experiences. And I think that kind of alienates us from each other. We don't understand each other super well because we're having really different experiences. And we live in different places. It used to be that in cities there were Republicans and in rural areas there were Democrats. And so you'd know somebody that you cared about and liked quite a bit who thought differently than you did, no matter what your political stripes were. You knew somebody that you respected, that you thought well of. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but the number of people in either party who would be okay with their kid marrying someone from the other party, I mean, those numbers are so abysmal right now. It used to be people were like, okay, fine. And now that's just unthinkable to people. And so there's a real, I call it a breaking of charity. It makes me think of that term that came out of the Salem witch trials, which is just when two people who are members of the same tribe disfellowship one another and they become two tribes. And it feels like that's happened in a big way. And there are reasons for it, but I think the internet is a big part of it. And I think this profit model that we have, where every website that you interact with, but especially every news producing website, or not even news producing, that's too grand a term, let's just say news conduit, like all of these social media apps that don't actually make any news, they just deliver it to you. Their whole business model depends on making you hate people who aren't like you. I mean, they make money on it. That's how because if you engage with a story, then they make money. And the things that drive engagement, love does it, awe does it, but nothing does it as much as hate and disgust and anger. Those really do it. And so we have a situation where the most powerful and lucrative industries in the whole country right now largely make their money by making us hate each other and by showing us caricatures of each other. So if you're a Democrat, they'll find the most objectionable person on the right that they can, and they'll show that to you over and over. And if you're a Republican, they'll find the most objectionable person on the left. And we've lost the ability to believe that people can disagree with us and have honorable intentions. Like, heaven forbid, if you're pro-life, someone should be pro-choice and have honorable, well-meaning, and vice versa. Heaven forbid, if you're pro-choice, that anyone should be pro-life and have good reasons for that, or want to do the right thing, but maybe disagree with you for whatever reason. And we've just completely lost the ability to assume positive intent on the part of people we don't know. And I do think a lot of it is money based. People are making money off your hate. And that's something that we have to reconcile with as a society, but we also have to reconcile with it as individuals. Like, do I want to participate, and how do I want to participate in a system that makes money based on me hating other people?
Thank you. I think that is a really critical point, and being aware of these business models. Sometimes we think it's all just so convenient and harmless, but there is a business model behind the things that we find on our apps and devices. We could probably be with you another hour, Tara, but we are almost out of time. And so I want to ask you, is there anything else that you would like to say to the audience today of about 1,300 people in the community here?
Oh, I don't know. Just thanks for having me. And it's a real pleasure to be in Utah. This is kind of my old stomping ground. So good luck to everyone. And I think, these places, they have a lot to offer, but you might have to go look for it a little bit. And good luck to everybody.
Thank you, Tara. I would like to end with another quote from you. And I think as a university and a community, this is a good one for all of us. Education should be associated more with inquiry than certainty. So on behalf of all the community that tuned in today, I want to thank Tara Westover. I want to thank my colleagues here in studio, because I knew it took a lot of effort. It would have been amazing to have Tara here in person, but we couldn't make that happen today. This has been a wonderful thing. I want to remind the audience that there will be a recording of this for those of you who might want to listen to it again later. And please stay tuned for our presidential lecture in spring 2021. Again, thank you, Tara, for such a wonderful exchange with you this morning. It's very affirmative and I think informative and inspiring to all of us. Thank you so much.